If your car's paint looks dull, full of swirls, scratches, or has that faded chalky look from years under the sun, don't worry. Today, I'm going to show you how to bring it back to life. So what's up guys, welcome to another episode of Pan the Organizer. In this video, we're diving into paint correction, also known as machine polishing. And I'll walk you through everything you need to know step by step. You'll learn about the tools, the pads, the compounds, the polishes, and techniques to safely and effectively remove defects and restore a deep mirror-like gloss. Paint correction might sound intimidating, but modern technology has made it easier and safer than ever, and by the end of this video, you'll have the confidence to polish your car like a pro. Let's go ahead and start the show. So welcome to the show guys, let's dive right into it. By the way, when you're going to be done watching this video, you will not be intimidated by paint correction or machine polishing ever again. It's not that complicated once you understand the basics, and that's what I'm here to do today, to demystify all of that and to give you the knowledge and the confidence you guys need to go ahead and enjoy paint correcting your own vehicle or somebody from your friends, your family, or whoever it may be, or if you're a professional detailer, you might want to brush up on some of those techniques, right, and knowledge. So this video is for everyone, beginners, enthusiasts, or professionals. By the way, quick disclaimer, this is not a sponsored video, nobody paid for this video, and I'll make sure to include the links to all the tools, products, and equipment in the description for you guys to check them out. So all you have to do is sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'll leave chapters in this video, so if you ever get back to the video and you want to skip to a certain section, you'll be able to do so. So we're going to be covering things like understanding the paint defects, understanding the paint system, the tools of the trade. By the way, we have all of these things to cover behind me. It's going to be a pretty awesome video. You want to stay tuned all the way till the end. We're going to talk about the pads, we're going to talk about the compounds and the polishes, we're going to talk about the prep. What do you do before you start polishing your vehicle, right? We're going to talk about how to inspect your work before you go ahead and apply your paint protection after you're done with the paint correction. We're going to talk about the finishing steps and of course some common mistakes to avoid while you're in the process. So let's start with the first category, understanding the paint defects. What is that all about? So first of all, you need to know that paint defects are often swirls, scratches, right? So anything basically that the light reflects on, if there's a defect, it will be amplified. So swirl marks and scratches are the most common ones, and they can go from very light marring. So that's typically induced when you're hand washing your vehicle, or if you're towel drying your vehicle with a microfiber drying towel. If you don't use proper lubrication, for example, during the drying steps, or if you don't have a good enough shampoo during the washing steps, or you're not using the proper tools when you're washing your car, that can induce those markings, or the love marks as we call them in the industry. So defects, less swirls and scratches, the deeper ones again can happen from a key job that you potentially got from somebody that doesn't like you, or a scratch you got in a parking lot or wherever it may be. Sometimes it's animals that are running on top of your hood, for example, whether it be a cat or a squirrel, so on and so forth, or just scratches in general. There's also paint oxidation. Now, what is that? Of course, if your vehicle sits outside in the elements, it's beaten down by the sun's damaging UV rays, and over time the UV blockers that are contained within the clear coat, that's the clear top layer of your paint system, well, they'll eventually either fade away or become oxidized, so that reaction that happens with the sun's UV rays, and it turns into a chalky appearance. For example, on red cars, that's a typical thing. You're going to notice some look chalky and pink. Well, that's because the reaction happened and the clear coat either failed or faded or oxidized, so you can remove an oxidation layer through a paint correction. Other types of damages can be from water spots, for example. If water spots are left unattended for long periods of time, those minerals within the water spots, they can start etching through the clear coat and leaving permanent stains or damage. And the only way to remove those, if a water spot remover doesn't work, or an acidic shampoo, so those are the lighter forms, well, then you have to step up to paint correction. If the stains are still there after paint correction, that means the etching is really, really deep, and either you'll need water sanding steps or a full panel respray. So those are the type of defects. Now, how do you inspect for those? Well, when you wash your vehicle, if you're outside, for example, well, obviously with the sunlight, you can have a look at your paint and see what kind of defects are in there. Or in the industry, what we like to do, especially when working indoors, because typically you'll want to do paint correction inside your house, is use inspection lights. Now, these are also going to be good to inspect your work when you're done. Now, no brand is necessarily better than the other. I just like Scan Grip as a brand for inspection lights. So something like this, where you can turn it on, you can even change the color temperature. So you go from kind of this warm hue to a colder hue, depending on what color vehicle you like. So on the darker vehicles, a lighter bluer hue is usually best to amplify the defects, and on lighter coated vehicles, the warmer hue is the best option. But again, you have different intensities as well. You have pen lights, this too from ScanGroup once again. So this is to flash on the surface and see what you are dealing with. So you're inspecting your work before you're starting, because this is going to give you an idea of what kind of strategy you'll put forward, right? If these scratches are only very light and faint, you might want to opt just for a polish. More on that later in the video. If the scratches are very deep, you're probably going to want to start with a compound, the more aggressive abrasive, and then finish with a polishing. That's a two-step compared to just using a one-step polish. Again, we're going to talk about that in the video so you understand what all that is. So you always inspect your paint under good lighting, and that will start giving you an idea of what level of paint correction is needed, because not all paints have the same amount of defects, and not all defects are the same, right? So again, lighter defects, you might want to go lighter on the pad selection and on the type of polish you're using. If you have deep swirls and scratches or heavy oxidation, then you'll use a multi-step approach with different pads, different compounds, and polishes. Now you have to understand what the paint system is about also, right? So modern paints are what we call clear coated paints. So you start with typically either an e-primer or a primer or some sort of rust protection. That's the base layer directly on the substrate or on the metal part in this case. After that, you move to the color stage. So that is the actual paint layer or the color layer. And then at the end or on top of that, you have the clear coat. So that's the transparent layer that also has UV blockers in there, but that's what provides the protection for the color coat that's underneath to protect against the elements, to help protect as much as it can for the sun's damaging UV rays and give that pop, that gloss, that depth, that shine to your vehicle. Now there are also matte paint finishes. It's a different type. They're still clear coated. It's just the way that it finishes down. It doesn't have any gloss or reflection. Now you do not want to use paint correction steps on matte PPF or matte paint because, well, you'll make them glossy. So if you have matte surfaces, you'll have to do chemical decontamination and other steps, but that's for another video. So this today is for clear coated vehicles with that glossy, shiny top layer. Next. The paint depth gauges. So now this is not necessary for everyone to have, but especially if you're a professional or if you're an enthusiast. Paint depth gauges, this is one from NextBTG, NextDiag. I did a full review on this. This is a digital one that gives you readouts on your phone. Basically what this does, it measures the thickness of the entire paint system that's on a metal substrate. So if you have, for example, your hood, your doors, you'd go around and you'd start measuring the depth of all those surfaces, and it'll give you a reading. So that's usually hard to interpret for everyone, but again, not all manufacturers use the same paints or clear coats. They don't have all the same thickness. As we're going forward in the future, more and more of the paints are becoming thinner and thinner. They're using water-based kind of paintwork systems and all that kind of stuff. So the paints are glossier, they're more durable, but they are thinner and thinner. Because paint correction, don't forget, we're removing a thin layer of that clear coat to remove the defects, to remove the swirls, the scratches, the oxidation, to make the paint true and flat. And by making it true and flat, we're increasing the light reflection, right? The way the light bounces off that clear coat, and the more perfected it is, the more true it is, the more light bounces around correctly without being deviated by those swirls and scratches. Well, the higher the gloss, the deeper the clarity, the deeper the richness of the paint and all that good stuff. So you want to preserve as much clear coat as possible though. So in not all scenarios are going to be using the full aggressive compound and then a polish and then aggressive wool pads and microfiber pads and then finish with the polishing. Again, it depends on the level of defects that you have. Now it's impossible to know how many times you can polish a paint because again, all paints are different. You don't know if a person has worked on the paintwork before. So these come in very handy for professionals to know if there's been a repainted panel, because that usually is much thicker compared to the factory applied paint with the robots and the spray arms that they use over there. So it's more precise but much thinner. And so again, this will give you a good indication. Now, this is not a fail-safe. I would still recommend always to perform a test spot. A test spot is picking a pad, picking a polish, and then seeing if it achieves the level of defect removal that you want. So work on a small 2x2 section. Typically, you'll want to do that on the hood because that's simple to access. And then you can try a few different combinations until you find the one that will suit your paintwork the same or the best, right? Because don't forget, again, one paint correction system might work well on one type of paint from one manufacturer, and using that same system will not necessarily work on another different vehicle because, again, different paint manufacturers, different types of clear coats, different thicknesses, different levels of defects. So paint correction, paint depth gauge can be important as a tool, especially if you're doing a lot of paint correction or you're working on vehicles and you have no idea if the vehicle's been repainted or how much paint you have to work with. That's a great tool to have. Talking about tools, let's go ahead and talk about the tools of the trade. So the first things will be the machine polishers, right? So there's 3 different types, generally speaking. We're not going to dive too much into depth because I have many videos on that on the channel. It's basically a choice, a personal choice, a personal preference. So typically you'll have dual action, also called random orbital. We call them DA polishers. You'll have forced rotation, also known as gear-driven polishers, and you'll have rotary polishers. So I have examples of each right here. So this, for example, is the Clean by Pan, the Organizer Dual Action 15 millimeter polisher. When you hear 8 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 15 millimeter, 21 millimeter, all that kind of stuff, it's the throw, how far the pad goes from that center point, how far it goes out. So the higher the number in millimeters, the longer throw it has, the more correction or surface it will cover. The smaller the number, well, the pad doesn't oscillate as much left to right. And so keep that in mind. So the dual action polisher mimics a figure 8 pattern as if you were doing a movement with your hand, and also that left to right. So when it's spinning in a different type of pattern. This typically is what is recommended for beginners or enthusiasts, because you can basically don't have to worry about burning through edges or burning through clear coat. That's a thing of the past. You'd have to be standing on that same spot for 10 to 15 minutes before being even worried about burning through the clear coat. So do not worry about that. They're made to minimize heat, because heat is the enemy of paint correction. We're going to get into tips and tricks, but always work in the shade on a cool surface or in a garage. Don't attempt paint correction in direct sunlight unless you're a professional with years of experience and you know what you're doing. So dual action, or DA, or random orbital, because the orbit is random. These typically will be what I recommend the most for the majority of people. This will get the job done. In your choice also, you typically have either a 5-inch backing plate, so that's the diameter, or a 6-inch backing plate on the bigger machines. So the Clean by Pan has a 5-inch backing plate that you can combine with 5-inch pads. We're going to talk about the pads in just a few seconds. And you have different sizes as well, right? So this is a 5 or a 6-inch, but to get into different areas on your vehicle, like mirrors, B-pillars, some door jambs sometimes, the bumpers, the grills, more intricate places, you'll use smaller polishers. So this one here is the Flex PXE80. This has a 3-inch head. You can also swap it for smaller heads, different tools, that kind of stuff. So as you can see, these are known as micro polishers or smaller polishers, because they go into places that the bigger ones can't, right? So when you wonder how do you access the mirrors, the B-pillars, the intricate grill areas and all that stuff, you need smaller polishers. Sometimes they're so small that you'll have to go for a 1-inch head like this. So this is the classic Hybrid Nano from Rupes, fantastic polisher maker. So this one here, as you can tell, has a smaller head. You put your little mini, this is a very micro or very small polisher, and this allows you to get into the very intricate areas. So different tool sizes for different parts of the car. Now, if you can only invest in one, obviously you'll get the bigger tool because this is the more versatile. The 5 or 6-inch will probably get you 85% of the surface done, and then the other 3 or 2-inch and 1-inch polishers, those are for the more intricate areas, so you can invest in those if you feel the need for that. So we have the dual action polisher. The next style of polisher is the gear driven, like this one here. So this is from Flex. This is their new 24 volt series, and you can tell obviously it's written here, gear driven on the side. We also know them as forced rotation, because this, with the gearing that's inside there, the pad always spins when you're using it. So if you need more power and you never want your pad to stall, this forced rotation or gear driven polisher is fantastic for that. Obviously, as you saw, you have corded options and you have a battery powered cordless option for pretty much all the polishers nowadays, so you can decide what you want. The technology has advanced enough that the battery powered now are amazing. They last a long time. They have all the power that you need. So forced rotation, I say, if you're maybe not for a beginner, but if you're an enthusiast and do have some experience and you never want your pads to stall, you can go ahead and try that. There's still a random orbital style, just a forced rotation. So the pad never stalls. Compared to a dual action, this is safer, obviously. You never run the risk of overheating the surface. And if you're applying too much pressure, the pad will stall, which means it stops its rotation. So you want to lift off a little bit. You don't want to apply too much pressure. 10 to 15 pounds max. Let the machine, the pad, and the polish do the work. You don't have to apply too much pressure on there. We're going to talk about pressure, hand speed, and the speed selections in just a few moments. But yeah, so that would be the biggest difference. A dual action polisher, if you apply too much force, or if it's in a weird area, the pad can stop spinning. So lift off. You always want that pad to keep itself spinning when you're doing paint correction. So the third type of machine polisher, and none the least, this is probably one of the earlier forms of polisher styles, is rotary. So this one here is from DIY Detail. This is their rotary polisher. Comes with a 5 or a 6 inch backing plate, so you select depending on what you need. So rotary spins on its axle in only one direction and doesn't have a random orbit. So this is probably the most powerful tool. This is typically used by professionals in the industry because they typically know how to use the tool. I don't necessarily recommend these styles of rotary polishers for beginners. If you don't know what you're doing and you hit an edge and you're polishing that too strongly, you might burn through the edge. So that's the only caveat. Now, it's still very easy to use. It's buttery smooth. You just have to have good control of it. Let the machine do the the work for you. And what you're doing is just helping it glide around. You'll have speed number 1 up to 5 on rotary polishers, but even speed number 1 or 2 is more than you'll probably need. If you want to do some quick correction with a rotary polisher, this cuts through stuff very, very quickly. So again, you have corded options, battery powered options, but those are the 3 types. So dual action, also known as random orbital, you have the forced rotation or gear driven, and then you have the rotary polishers. So we covered the 3 types. Again, it's a question of personal preference. If you watch many videos, you'll see people who love dual action. You'll see others who love rotary. You'll see some who swear only by gear driven. It doesn't really matter. But again, if you're a beginner, you've never done this, and you don't want to be stressed out with machine selection and all that kind of stuff, just go for a good dual action machine and you'll be good to go. On my channel, that's what I prefer the most. I've been detailing for 28 years now, and the dual action has always served me well. In some situations, I'll bust out the rotary or gear driven. But honestly, dual action works just fine. And of course, your different selection of machine sizes depending on the type of work you're doing. Speed control. It's important that you're not polishing by applying too much pressure. Heat is the enemy when you're doing paint correction. Again, avoid working in direct sunlight. You don't want to do paint correction on hot panels because the product you're using will flash off too quickly. The oils will dry off within the compounds or polishes because that's the lubricating aspect. You're going to cut down on your working time. It's going to be a nightmare. It might start to dust. Don't do it. So work in the shade on a cool surface or in a garage if you can. That's always the best conditions. You want to use slow and steady arm speed. Typically, you're going to hear about passes. What is a pass? Well, that's the movement. You're going to go in a crosshatch pattern. So you're moving up and down and then left to right. So one up and down, that's one pass. And then one left to right, that's a second pass. And then if you want to do a third pass, that's another up and down. So up and down, left and right, slow and steady arm speed, right? When you're using your machine polisher, this is not a race. So you want to leave the time to the machine, the pad, and the polishing compound to do the work for you. So So you're going on the surface, you're using steady and slow arm speed, you're overlapping your previous pass by 50%. Make sure to overlap, and you're moving around, and then the up and down, and there you go, just like so. So take the time to do it well. You're going to see me doing it in many, many videos, but slow and steady arm speed. Again, this is not a race. Let the weight of the machine do the work for you. Don't apply too much pressure, not more than 10 to 15 pounds, like a good arm shake. If you're shaking someone's hand, that kind of pressure, right, or force. Again, if you're over applying too much force, you're going to generate heat, and heat is the enemy of paint correction. You're going to want also to take control of the speeds, right? So if we're using a dual action polisher, for example, like this one from Clean by Pan, what you're doing first when you're putting your pad on, you're going to prime depending on if you're using a spray polish or a liquid form compounder polish. We're going to get to that in a few seconds. You're going to start to spread that on the surface. I like to spread at the lowest speed. So speed 1 or 2, and then you're going to spread quickly the product. That's when you're going to do the quick arm speed. And then you're going to jack that up to typically speeds 5, or like you have maximum 6. I would like speed 5 for polishing. So when you're doing the compound or polishing step, the actual paint correction, that's when you bump that speed up to a level 4, a level 5, sometimes a level 6. Again, test spots will dictate what kind of speed you're going to use. So you're spreading on low speed and you're correcting at a higher speed. If you're using your machine polisher with a soft pad to apply a protection like a liquid wax or a liquid paint sealant, then you're using slow speed once again, speed 1 or 2. That's all you need because you're not correcting the paint. All you're doing is applying the protection. So that's for the arm speed and the speed itself. Now we're going to talk about the pads. So typically you're going to have 3 types of pads in the paint correction world. Now there's a foam pad, this one here being the Clean by Pan, the Organizer Blue Foam Polishing Pad. I designed these in partnership with Buff & Shine, one of the best makers of pads in the world. Lake Country as well, make fantastic pads. I just happen to love these Buff & Shine because for the system that I made for the Clean by Pan, I wanted it to be very easy for people to select. So we only have 3 pads in the lineup. So we have this blue foam polishing pad. We have this wool pad. This is our cutting pad for the compound step. And we also have a white foam waffle jeweling pad for that last getting out the most gloss you can if you want to have a 3-step system. So 3 different pads, 1 spray polish that can act as a compound or as a polish. We're going to talk about that. And so it removes all the guesswork that you have to do. You don't have to stress out about buying 50 different polishes, 50 different compounds, 1,000 different pads. Note that every manufacturer has its own color coding as well. So you'll have foam pads depending on which brand you use. You're going to notice that the softer foams are the polishing foams and the harder foams are the ones using for cutting. So you want a stiffer pad when you're cutting, when you're doing the compound step with the more aggressive compound, which has bigger abrasives. And you want a slightly softer pad when you're doing the polishing step, because that you're jeweling, you're finishing and removing the compound step scratches, right? So you're finishing down the paint. So you want to use something a bit softer. Now, every company has its own color code. Unfortunately, there's nothing universal out there. So you go on the company's website, you look at the pad system, and you see what color is for what type of use. But here we're covering the different types of pads now. So again, foam polishing pad, you'll have things like wool pads. These are typically used for cutting. So this one here is, again, the Clean by Pan, the Organizer wool pad. We have all our pads in 6-inch variants, 5-inch variants, and 3-inch variants as well. And last but not least, you also have microfiber pads. Now, these have a different type of nap because these are Eurofiber 50/50 pads from Eurofiber, the brand. So those are the 3 types, guys. You got foam, you have wool, and you have microfiber. So different pads depending on the needs, depending on the type of paint, depending on the level of defect removal that you want to do as well, right? So we talk about color coating, depending on which brand you're using, the type of hardness of the pad itself. Softer has less correction, more finishing. Stronger, stiffer pads have more correction, less finishing. So again, depending on what you're using, it's important to match the pad to the compound or polish and to the level of defect removal that you're doing. Talking about compounds and polishes. Oh, by the way, when we're talking about a 1-step polishing system or a 2-step system, what we're talking about is the level of defect removal and the types of pads and polishes that you're using. So when you hear a 2-step paint correction process? That's, well, because it's two steps. The first step is the compound or cutting step, so to remove the bigger defects and scratches. And the second step is the finishing step of polishing, jeweling the paint, polishing the paint, however you want to put it. That's to improve the gloss, the clarity, and to remove the sanding marks of the compound step. So that's a two-step process. So for a two-step process, for example, in the Clean by Pan lineup, you would start with the wool cutting pad as your first step with our spray polish. And then you would go for the second step with the blue foam polishing pad and that same spray polish, because it's very versatile and can be used for cutting and can be used for polishing. So two-step process, start with the cutting, finish with the polishing. If you just have very light defects, light swirls, almost no oxidation, and you only want to either remove previous protection and strip off that coating, for example, or that old wax, you want to bump up the gloss, and you want to prep the surface to make it great for your future protection to be applied, and you only have light defects once again, you can use just a one-step polishing system. So that would be the blue foam polishing pad or whatever polishing pad that you want to use with your polish. In this case, the Clean by Pan spray polish or whatever polish you guys choose. So two-step, once again, you have two steps, two pads, and typically a compound and a polish. And then one step, you're only using one pad and one polish because there's less defects to remove. So it's not that complicated once you understand the basics of all of that. How to choose based on the defect severity? Well, we spoke about that, right? So we said if you have very deep scratches, a lot of swirl marks, heavy swirls, and heavy oxidation, you're going to want to do the two-step process. First start with the cutting and then finishing with the polish. If you only have light defects and you want to bump up the gloss a bit, or you want to strip off an old wax or a coating or a sealant, you want to improve the clarity and there's only light scratches and swirls, well, then you can do a one-step process with a polishing pad and a polish. Spray polishes, well, they've been on the market, right? So we're going to talk about the liquid forms in just a few seconds, but keep in mind that you have spray polishes that are available now. So if we look at the compounds and polishes that are available on the market, let's start with the traditional forms. So you'll have the liquids. So you'll have them in bottles, different sizes. So these are some that I like a lot. So this one here is the Rupes, this DA coarse. So coarse because this is a cutting compound, meaning it has bigger abrasives. So if you were to look at a compound from a microscope perspective, you're going to see abrasives because a compound and a polish both are abrasives. It's just the size of the polish or inside the molecules that are in there that are bigger with compounds and much smaller or refined for polishes. So this one here works super well. Again, all the links in the description, guys, but you have liquid forms, other cutting compounds. There's so many on the market, but the ones I like a lot, 3D's ACA 500. 3D is a great maker of their compounds and polishes. Sonax from Germany, this is Profiline Cut Max, works super well. Typically, if you read the labels, you're going to see here, see for cut and correction, this is high, and a little less for gloss and brilliance because this is a cutting compound. So the bigger abrasives. If you want more refining, less cutting, you're moving to the polish. So all three of those were compounds. And then we move to liquid polishes. So that's the refining step. So with a polish like this one here, this is the Rupes DA Fine Polish. These have smaller abrasive technology, so these are made to refine the surface. You're going to remove the sanding marks left behind from the compound if you're doing a two-step compound, or that DA haze or whatever left blemishes that are from the compound step. You're going to improve depth, clarity, and gloss. Don't ever forget, regardless of what people say, as good as waxes, sealants, and ceramic coatings are, some can bump up the gloss a few gloss units if you were to measure with a gloss meter. The biggest way to improve gloss and clarity on any clear-coated surface is through paint correction. Again, don't forget, you're removing the blemishes, you're removing the oxidation, you're removing the swirls, the scratches, and you're making that surface more flat or more true. That means the light will reflect or bounce off in a better way, and then perceived through your eyes, you're getting that increase in gloss. And if you were to measure with a gloss meter, you'll notice that after a proper paint correction, that's how you get the biggest increase in measurable gloss. So always do paint correction first if you want the biggest jump in gloss. And then, of course, at the end, you're going to apply your paint protection, whether it's a wax, a sealant, or a ceramic coating. So in the liquid polishes, so those are the more refined abrasives, again, from the three makers, you have Rupes, you have this one here. This is 3D ACA 520, if you want that mirror finish. All of these are body shop safe, silicone free, and they have little or no dusting, which is what I truly like. And then you have this one here from Germany, another classic Sonax perfect finish. So if you notice on the Sonax, for example, you see how now it went down for the cut compared to the their compound, which was maximum correction and less gloss. Here you have less cutting because this is a polish, and you have more gloss or brilliance at the end because this is made to refine the surface. There's different combinations. You're free to use whatever you guys want, by the way. You're not locked into one system, so you can do test spots. So if you have, for example, 3 different compounds and 3 different polishes, depending on the level of defects, let's say you're going for a 2-step correction, you can do a small little square with one of the compounds from one brand and finish with the polish on the other and see the level, and then mix and match with different pads and different products. Don't be scared to try stuff, guys. You'll be able to find what's best for your paint system. Now, in the recent advancements in the past years, there's been spray polishes that are on the market, and that's what I brought to my own line of Clean by Pan, the organizer. Why? Because I wanted performance, but also simplicity. I heard my viewers' feedback through almost a decade of being on YouTube. I started my channel in April of 2016. I'm filming this, by the way, this video in October of 2025. And so the biggest frustration or the biggest stress inducer is trying to figure out which compound people need, which polish people need, which pad among the hundreds of different variants that are available on the market. So I wanted to make a system that will get 90 to 95% of the jobs done. There's always these oddball vehicles with different paints that might need a more aggressive compound or a different type of polish. But in general, if you stick to my system, it should be pretty simple. So the spray polish, again, it's in spray form. So contrary to liquids, you're using a lot less of this. To prime your pad, this is 1 or 2 sprays, actually two sprays to prime the pad, and then 1 or 2 sprays for subsequent passes. And pretty simple to use. It's quick to cut, has no silicones. This has no dusting, no PFAs or no forever chemicals in any of my products. So they're at the forefront of your health and safety, and that's important to me. It smells amazing, contrary to many that just smell like chemicals, and they just work. Now, this spray polish, if you pair it with a cutting pad, say from the Pan, the organizer line, if you were to combine the cutting pad, the wool cutting pad with the spray polish, that's your compounding step if you want to do a 2-step, right? And then if you want to use it as a polish, it can be used as the same polish, so the same liquid spray that you pair with the blue foam polishing pad for your 2nd step. Or if you just have light defects and you want a single step paint correction, well, you combine these two once again, so the spray polish from Clean by Pan with the blue foam polishing pad, and boom, you're done. So 1 spray polish, again, this can act as a compound if you pair it with a cutting pad, or it can act as a polish if you pair it with a polishing pad. So it removes a lot of that guesswork. It's just so efficient, so cool to use. It can remove scratches all the way down to 1,500 to 1,000 grit. Of course, again, depending on the paint type. But this is meant for quick correction. Typically, 1 or 2 passes is all you'll need for the compound step, then 1 or 2 passes for the polishing step. Again, I remind you, passes are up and down, that's 1 pass. Left and right, that's a 2nd pass. So 1 up and down, 1 left and right will usually get the job done. Of course, you can keep correcting. If you're inspecting your work and you see that you still need correction, this will give you long enough work time, but this is meant to be quick and efficient. Regardless if you're a pro or a beginner, you are going to love this. And again, I have a tutorial on scratch removal using the Clean by Pan paint system. I'll leave it linked in the description. Check it out. It's so easy to use. Now, when you're preparing for polishing, before you even attempt your paint correction steps, it is important to wash and decontaminate your vehicle. So you have to obviously, well, common sense, you have to wash the car to remove all the dirt and the debris, right? And then you're going to dry the vehicle or keep it wet depending on what you're doing next. Typically, I like an iron removing step, a chemical decontamination. If you feel that there's some grit or a sandpaper kind of like texture, that means there's embedded contamination in your clear coat. You're going to want to clay the surface to remove that embedded contamination with a clay bar, a clay towel. In the Clean by Pan lineup, I have a clay towel, super easy to use with proper lubrication. And then you should have a glass smooth surface. And then you're ready for paint correction. So there's been this debate, should I decontaminate before paint correcting? Like, should I clay the surface before attempting paint correction? And I say yes, unless your vehicle is brand new, has never been outside, and there's literally no contamination on the surface, or you maybe decontaminated a week ago, then you don't have to clay the surface. But if it's been a while, always clay the surface before polishing, because don't forget, that pad that's spinning at high speed, if it picks up any of that grit and contamination that's embedded in the clear coat, you're spinning that at a high speed further into the clear coat, causing more damage. So you should always decontaminate your paint before you attempt paint correction. Also, you're going to want, depending on which compound or polish you're using, some might stain the trim. So you might want to always tape the plastic trim, the trim around the windows, the plastic trim, all that kind of stuff. For that, you use painter's tape, or in this case 3M precision masking tape that I really like because it doesn't leave any residue behind. Or there's this Komoi tape or Ibuko tape from Kamikaze. This is a Japanese brand, and again, no residue left behind. They have different sizes of tapes. So tape your plastic trim. And in the case of the Clean by Pan, the organizer spray polish, this does not stain trim. So if you accidentally hit your trim, just wipe it off with a microfiber towel, no problem. Or actually, if you have some old, faded, oxidized, that chalky white plastics, you can even polish the surface with this and the blue pad, for example. Of course, test in an inconspicuous area first, because not all plastics are meant to be polished, by the way. But again, this is fantastic. Not only on paint, you can use it on glass, wheels, lights, tail lights, metal, even pretty much all the exterior surfaces, and it just works very well. And this will not leave any staining or white chalky residue on your plastic trim. So that's pretty cool. So in my case, I don't need to tape trim anymore because I use my spray polish in the system. Now for the paint correction process itself, you're going to first start by priming your pads. Priming means adding a bit of the polishing compound or liquid onto the pad itself, especially if you're using a wool or a microfiber. So things like these have this textile material on there, obviously wool or microfiber. So you'll want to pour a few drops on there and spread it out with a glove. Always wear nitrile gloves when you're detailing, guys, and then spread it on the surface. This will prime your pads. Or in the case of the spray polish from Clean by Pan, when you have it on your polisher at low speed, you're going to spray 1-2 sprays directly on there. The spray is even, it's a nice mist, and it'll prime the pad that way. So you can also use a tool that Rupes came out with. This is called their claw. So there's this part here that you can use to butter the product on there. So a few drops of the polish or compound, and then you're using this like you're buttering toast. So you spread that around and you have a primed pad. Now, not everybody primes their pads. I like to prime these types of pads, or even your foam polishing. So for foam, depending on which brand you're talking to, again, a few pea-sized drops on the pad and then on the surface at low speed. You're going to want to let that spin on its own in that same place for 5 to 10 seconds. This is going to spread those dots on there and your pad is primed. Now, when it's time to do the compound or polish, you're going to want to typically apply 3 to 5 pea-sized drops. Pea-size are small drops, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 around there. That's all you need for the panel that you're working on. You only reload when you see that it's drying up on the surface and that there's no compound or polish that you're using anymore. You're going to see it, the trail that it leaves behind. When you see you need to reload, just reload. With the spray polish, it's even easier when it's time to reload after each section pass or 2. You simply, again, low speed on your polisher. You're going to take your spray polish, 1 or 2 sprays, and you're reloaded super easy. So you're not using too much of the compounds or polishes. Again, pea-sized drops, prime your pads correctly and reload when needed, when you feel that it's drying up and that you don't have any liquid on the surface anymore. So work section by section. Again, this is not a race, guys. So section means typically a panel. So you work on your hood first, and then you're going to remove the polish or the compound and inspect your work. Again, using your inspection lights to see what kind of correction you got. Now, if you're doing a 2-step process, a compound followed by a polish, after the first step, the compound, you're typically going to want to buff off using a microfiber towel. So what I like to do for compounds and polishes is use the Clean by Pan, the Organizer Jobber 350 GSM. All my towels are made in South Korea, premium blends. and this one here has no edges, so it's not going to scratch the paint. A premium blend. This is we call it the jobber because it can be used for different types of uses, both inside and out. So this removes polishes very, very easily. Has that perfect thickness, not too thick, not too thin. I just love this to remove the polish itself. So after you're done removing the compound or the polish, I would recommend you use a panel prep spray. Now this is alcohol based. Typically, some people like to use just isopropyl alcohol diluted in a bit of water. That I found, depending on which type of spray polish or compound you're using, is not always enough to remove all of the polishing oils and residue. So good spray, panel prep sprays contain alcohol, in this case for the Clean by Pan panel prep spray, isopropyl alcohol for evaporation, but other stuffs as well in there, like solvents, for example, to really help to pull out the polishing oils and residue. You wipe them away, and then you have a truly virgin clear coat to work with. So after your compound, you're going to use a panel prep spray to inspect your work. And then if it's satisfactory, then you can move on to the polishing step. Same thing, if you're only doing a one-step polish with a polish and a polishing pad, when you're done, you take the white Jobber 350 towel or whatever microfiber towel you guys want, you remove that polish, and then you're going to spray the panel prep spray on the surface. That's going to remove the polishing oils and residue. For the panel prep spray, I like to use the Mr. Twister microfiber towel. Butter suede edge here. I absolutely love this. And you have this 16 by 16 twisted loop towel, super absorbent. So you're going to mist the surface. You're going to wipe the surface with your panel prep spray. You're going to let that dwell a few seconds. Just don't let it dry off. And then you're going to flip the towel to the clean and dry side, or have a second clean and dry towel, and wipe and mop up all that residue. So you're removing those oils and those residue. So very important to always use a panel prep spray after your compound step before the polishing, and of course always after your polishing step. That's going to remove the oils and whatever might be left behind, so that way you have a virgin clear coat, and then you can apply your paint protection, your wax, your paint sealant, or ceramic coating. Panel prep sprays are particularly important and crucial before you apply ceramic coatings, because ceramic coatings need to bond directly to a virgin clear coat without any interference from any oils, residue, or previous protections. And paint correction is the only way to ensure 100% removal, by the way, of any previous protection. Some people think that panel prep sprays alone can fully remove waxes or sealants. Maybe if they're very, very old, have been there a few months on the surface and they're on their last days. But for freshly applied waxes and sealants, panel prep sprays are not enough. You need to mechanically abrade the surface with at least a polish and a polishing pad with your machine polisher, and that ensures 100% removal. And again, when you're done with your paint correction steps, use the panel prep spray to remove the oils, the residue, and to have a squeaky clean virgin clear coat to work with, and then you apply your protection. So you're working section by section. Again, low, steady arm speed. You're spreading the polish or the compound at low speed. And then when you're doing the correction, that's when you bump the speed up to speeds 4, 5, or 6 on your machine polisher, depending on which one you have. Cross hatch pattern again. So up and down, left and right. You're doing that basket weave or cross hatch pattern, as we call it. And your pad cleaning is also very important. So when you're finished with a section or a panel, it's important to clean your pads. Now, there are some pad cleaning tools that you'll see, some brushes. For example, this one is a classic. I think this one here, it's an old one that I have. Is it made by Chemical Guys? Anyways, this is inexpensive and it's a pad brush, so it works well. And of course, that same claw tool that we used before from Rupes, the Bigfoot claw, to spread the polish. Well, on one side, you have this kind of brush system to also brush the pads. So while, for example, it's on your machine polisher, you're going to spin that at low speed, and you're going to put the brush against it like this. And while it's spinning, you see that? It's going to clean the fibers. And working with clean pads is very important, because spent polish and the spent oils that are on there, they're preventing the fibers or the foam from doing its job when you're finished the cycle. So after each section or panel, it's very important to clean your pads. So again, you can use these tools, the brushes, to clean your pads. You can use compressed air, especially on wool or microfiber. I would be very careful with compressed air onto foam because you can damage some of the foam cells that are in there. So be very careful or gentle if you use compressed air. Or my favorite method to clean pads in general is using a pad washer. I have the System 4000 pad washer from Lake Country. What I like to do in there is put 2 gallons of water and use basically an ounce of a rinseless wash. So like the Clean by Pan, the organizer rinseless wash works fantastic. That's half an ounce for every gallon of water. So if you have 2 gallons of water, that's just 1 ounce that you're putting in there, or 30 milliliters of the rinseless wash. And that acts as your cleaning solution for the pad. So you're pumping that pad system or the pad washer. It injects that cleaning liquid into the pad. You're rubbing it on the ridges and the ribs that are in there. Then you lift off just 1 inch or just a little bit off that thing. You put your polisher at maximum speed. That's going to spin out all the liquid and eject it. And then it's only going to be moist. And then you're ready to reprime your pad with your liquid or your spray polish, and you're good to continue polishing the next section. So typically, if you don't have a pad washer for a vehicle, you're going to use anywhere from 4 to 6 cutting pads and 4 to 6 polishing pads. You're switching pads after every other section, for example. So always work with clean pads. And then if you have a pad washer, technically for a vehicle, you only need 1 cutting pad and 1 polishing pad because you have the luxury of being able to clean your pad after each section. So there's 2 schools of thoughts. I like to clean my pads after each section. If you're not cleaning your pads after each section, well, they'll switch to fresh new pads, prime those pads, and then continue with your work on the other sections. So keep that in mind. Work with clean pads. You're increasing your efficiency and you're increasing your cutting ability by working with clean pads. Inspect your work. So again, we said you're going to wipe down when you're done with the compound, wipe down with a panel prep spray, and then inspect, and then move to the polishing step. And then after your polishing step, again, you're using the panel prep spray to wipe the surface. Then you're going to inspect your final work, right, with your inspection light to see what level of defect removal you made. And then to make sure, of course, you removed all the polish and all the residue and all that kind of stuff. And you're good to go to use the panel prep spray. This will prep the surface for your next step, which is the paint protection step. So very important to use the panel prep spray either in between steps if you're doing a 2-step polish, but for sure always at the end of your polishing step. This not only removes polishing oils and residue, but can also remove some of the fillers sometimes that some polishes like to use, which I don't like typically to have fillers. So none of these have fillers, and especially the spray polish by Clean by Pan, the organizer, there's no fillers in this. This is a pure compound and polish, which is what I really prefer. So there's no cheating, because the ones who use fillers, well, you might not have done proper paint correction and the fillers will leave over time after a few weeks to a few months. So then you're going to see the scratches again. You're like, what happened? Well, you were masking those with the fillers. Glazes are known for that, which is why I never use glazes in my videos, if you notice, because I want actual true paint correction with a compound and a polish. I don't want a glaze because glaze typically contain fillers and they can also prevent proper bonding from ceramic coating. So a glaze is more an old school thing. If you know, you know, but I would avoid those and stick to true polishes and compounds without any fillers in them. The finishing steps. Now, once you're done with all that, you're obviously going to remove the masking tape. If you masked some of the parts on the vehicle, for example, the plastic trim, and then you can take a microfiber towel and your panel prep spray again to go over there if there's any tape residue that's on there and that kind of stuff. And well, now it's time for the icing on the cake. Now it's time to apply your choice of paint protection. Now we have 3 general types. Typically a carnauba wax. Those are organic, they have that warm glow, and they give you just a satisfaction when you're applying them, but they don't last very long, typically 1 to 3 months at best, and they flash off very quickly in high temperatures. When the temperature goes over 140 Fahrenheit on the surfaces, don't quote me on this, but that's typically a general thing that we notice. Over 140 degrees Fahrenheit, they also start to flash the waxes, and they can eventually just be removed by the extreme heat. So they're not super durable, but they do look amazing. The next form of paint protection is a paint sealant. Typically, those will last 3 to 6 months. It's a synthetic form, typically found in liquid form, that you can apply, that you can replace if you don't want to use a wax, you want something a little longer lasting. And the third, and not the least, this is the latest advancement in technology, is a ceramic coating. Clean by Pan has the 3 and the 8-year coating. So those are multi-year semi-forms of paint protection, semi-permanent forms of paint protection. They're much more highly chemical resistant compared to waxes and sealants. Super glossy. They give you that candy-like appearance. They have the best hydrophobic properties, so how tight and round the water beads are and how quickly that water can sheet off. They add self-cleaning properties, meaning the vehicle is much easier to clean during your maintenance washes. Some of them have UV protection and so on and so forth. But basically, I like ceramic coatings the most because they last the longest and you just give an awesome finish. But regardless of what you guys prefer, it's all fine as long as you protect your paint. Because now that you've done all that paint correction, you want to make sure to add paint protection to, well, protect what you did for work. And if you use safe washing and drying methods in the future, you shouldn't have to repolish the vehicle for a few years at least. Typically, when I buy a new car, I keep mine for 3 years and then I just get a new one. So I'll polish as soon as I take delivery, because yes, you can and should polish a new car. I'll talk about that to get it to perfection. And after that, I just use proper products, good safe drying methods, safe washing methods, and I don't have any marring or little to no scratches. So as long as you do that, you'll preserve your clear coat for years because you won't have to repolish. And yeah, just have fun protecting the vehicle. There's also a fourth type of protection that's a hybrid or in between. It's the spray coatings or the spray ceramic sealants or graphene sprays or whatever you want to put it. Basically ceramic technology or graphene technology in spray form. Those typically will give you 3 to 12 months of protection depending on the brand. They're quicker and easier to apply compared to a ceramic coating. They're less expensive, but obviously they're not going to be as durable or as resistant to chemicals as true ceramic coatings in the glass bottles, right? If we look at common mistakes to avoid when you're doing paint correction, you definitely do not want to work in direct sunlight. Again, heat is the enemy, not only of the correction itself, but when you're outside, if there's too much sunlight and heat on the panels, your liquid compound or your spray compound or spray polish or liquid polish, whatever you're using for the correction process, will dry out too quickly. It's going to be a nightmare to work with. It's not going to give you enough running time to do your passes, and it's going to dust up. You're not going to like your life, and you're not going to achieve the results you're looking for. So heat, again, is the enemy of paint correction. Always keep that in mind. Work on cool surfaces in a shaded area, or if you can, in a garage. Next, don't overwork a single area, right? Don't stay on that same spot for minutes on end. You're not achieving anything anymore and you're generating heat. Again, you remember, yes, heat is the enemy of paint correction. So slow and steady passes, but keep your pad moving in your left and right and up and down movement. Steady and slow, but keep it moving, right? What else? Dirty pads. We spoke about that. Don't work with dirty pads. Always clean your pads between sections or use a pad washer to clean your pad between sections, things like that. So those are common mistakes that you want to avoid. And also use proper tools and techniques. So we covered here from reputable brands the equipment or tools or products that you can use. There's a bunch of other polishes, compounds on the market. I have videos on those if you want to do a deeper dive and find out what maybe is available in your area if you want to check that out. But no, that's the bottom line is just take your time, do things right, use the proper tools and products, and don't be scared. There is absolutely nothing that can go wrong, especially if you're using a dual action machine polisher. Those are meant to generate little to no heat. They're going to stall if you're applying too much pressure, meaning there's a mechanism that's going to prevent you from doing things that you might regret. And again, with the modern products, just enjoy. There's almost nothing that can go wrong as long as you follow the directions of the products that you're using. You're taking your time, you're working in the correct environment for that kind of thing. Just enjoy it. You can try and practice on a friend's vehicle, on somebody in your family, for example, or if you're a professional and you're just starting out paint correction, maybe offer a free paint correction to a customer and explain to them that you're learning kind of thing. But whatever it is, just take the time and do it. You'll see after your first time, you'll say, that's all it is. It wasn't that complicated. Now that you have all the knowledge and the information, that goes a long way and you're going to enjoy the process. Absolutely. It is not that hard. It's not rocket science, guys. It's basically a liquid, a pad, and a machine that are just helping to correct the surface. So when you see it that way, I think it removes a lot of the fear, right? So again, I'll remind you that I'll keep all the tools, products, and equipment linked in the description under the video for you guys to check them out. And well, if you enjoyed this series, let me know if you want me to do another I have a lot of detailing 101 videos on my channel, so from how to wash a car, how to decontaminate a car, so the iron removers, the clay bars, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, how to do your paint correction, how to apply paint protection, a wax or a ceramic coating, for example. That detailing 101 series is perfect for beginners, but also if you want to brush up on your knowledge, if you're a professional, go ahead and check those out. We always learn new things on the Clean by Pan the Organizer YouTube channel, or Pan the Organizer channel, I should say. If you haven't subscribed, by the way, click the subscribe button that's found under this video, and you'll continue to learn more about car detailing, all the products, tips, tricks, tool reviews, you name it. It's on here. Thanks to you guys, you made it one of the top detailing channels in the world on YouTube. We have 1.1 million subscribers at the moment of filming this video and over 160 million views. I have each and every one of you to thank for that. So, and if you have any other ideas that you want me to dive into for a Detailing 101 series, let me know. Drop comments in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed this video. If that's the case, one way you can show your appreciation is smash the thumbs up button that's under the video. This shows me your support. It helps the algorithm to understand that you guys like this kind of content, and I can continue to produce more. And of course, purchasing products from the links in the description helps to support the channel as well at no extra cost to you. So thank you if you do decide to use my links to purchase some stuff. And check out the Clean by Pan, the Organizer brand. By the way, if you haven't checked it out, we have everything to wash, to clean, to protect, to enhance your vehicle, even microfiber tools, towels, mitts, and all that good stuff, polishers, pads, you name it. Again, all those links in the description. And in the meantime, guys, don't forget, keep it tight, keep it clean, and I'll see you on the next one.